Ford is the VP of Strategic Services for DonorDrive. He collaborates with nonprofit clients to maximize their return on investment and the value of DonorDrive social fundraising software and services. He has 28 years of experience. He started in kindergarten. 28 years of experience in the nonprofit industry, and before joining DonorDrive, he was with a little group called the American Cancer Society for 25 years. He started in the organization as a field rep, and then his experience includes heading income development for the Wisconsin and Pennsylvania division, and then he was also part of the team that started ACS's shared services division, and he was EVP for Virginia and West Virginia and for business development of the South Atlantic division. He has a very, very memorable event experience that I bet many of you will not share. His most memorable event experience would be an American Cancer Society gala in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the early 1990s. At the end of a wonderful event, the moment seemed right, so he asked his wife to marry him. Aww. Come on up, Ed.
Nothing moves a young man's heart like a good fundraiser, right? So I was glad that David asked me to speak on this topic because I think it's very important. Can I move this over here? Okay. No nonprofit can be successful in the long term unless they figure out how to hire good staff, train them up, and to keep them. I think it's also a very relevant topic because the economy is improving, and unfortunately that means that there's going to be a little more turnover. There's going to be more competition for employees. More people are creating jobs, and so there's going to be more competition for employees. Some of you may have seen this. This is from the January Chronicle of Philanthropy. 59% of nonprofit leaders say hiring, training, and keeping workers is their biggest challenge. These people must be reading the newspaper because in September of last year, 2.8 million Americans quit their jobs to take another job. It's the highest one-month total since 2006. And recently, a former official of the Labor Department said that he thought 2015 will see more employee turnover than any year since 2006. Now, there's a reason why that's happening. There's a lot of unhappy people out there. This is a survey that the Gallup organization did last summer. They interviewed employees from around the United States, and they found this. 29% of employees said they were engaged, meaning they were actively working for the success of their company. 52% of employees said they were not engaged, meaning they weren't giving their best effort. And 18% said they were actively unengaged, meaning they were unhappy and unproductive at work and liable to spread negativity. So whether these people leave on their own or you move them on, let me say this. I don't think nonprofits have this depth of a problem, but they do have it to a certain degree. So whether these people leave on their own because they're unhappy and the economy is improving, or you move them on, chances are that onboarding is going to be more important than ever. Of course, onboarding is important because it's your chance to make a good first impression on your new employee, get them off on the right track, because if you don't get them off on the right track, it's hard to correct that in the future. It's your chance to set standards, tell them what's expected of them. And I also think this, onboarding is more important for nonprofits than it is for for-profits. The reason I say that is that for-profits have a product to sell. Nonprofits, your product are your employees and the relationships that they form out in the field. So, how the public feels about a nonprofit greatly depends on those employees out in the field and the events that they put on. So if you hire someone that's a bad employee, or you do not get them trained up properly, they can not only damage your events, but they can damage your nonprofit's reputation. I found this out the hard way. 10 years ago, Molly mentioned 10 years ago, I was with the American Cancer Society, and I was EVP of the Virginia and West Virginia, the states of Virginia and West Virginia. We had an onboarding program, but we really weren't doing a good job. We had a good core of veteran employees, but we constantly were turning over new employees. Most of our new employees left, half of them left within 18 months of hiring. Then we had some other employees that we thought were going to be superstars, and they were struggling. So what I did is I started doing informal coffees with our new employees to try to find out what was going on. And this is what I learned. We were really doing a poor job of coaching them up. We were not preparing them to do their job, and they were very frustrated. And they weren't leaving because of salary, and they weren't leaving because of the hours. They were leaving because they were frustrated because they didn't think they could do the job. What we were doing was we were telling them how to do their job, and we really weren't teaching them how to do their job. So what I learned from that experience is that you really had to put together a good staff development program. So what I'd like to share with you is some of the things that I learned from that experience and some best practices that I have implemented over time that have really worked to develop staff. So there's 3 elements of any good staff development program. The 3 T's: talent, time, and training. You have to have the right talent to start with. You have to put the time in. There's no substitute for putting in time with new employees, and you have to train them. So let's talk about each one of these individually. Talent, of course, we all want to make the right choice in hiring. Hire people that have the skills and the personality to do the jobs that we're hiring them for. But we don't always interview to bring those skills out. Many times we interview just going over past experiences, rehashing their resume. We don't ask enough questions like this. Tell me when you've been a team leader. Tell me when you've worked with a team. Tell me when you've recruited volunteers. Things like that. So I know this isn't new news to a lot of you. Many of you have systems that you're doing these types of things out in your organizations. But even if you're doing these types of things, make sure that you're interviewing your interviewers. For those here that are managers of managers, make sure that you're talking to your managers and making sure that they're not getting into a rut and just hiring based on their gut. Make sure that they're hiring based on those skills that the candidate needs. Time, you really have to have a long-term structured onboarding program. If you have that, you're 85% more likely to have employees that are going to be with you after 3 years. So what does a long-term training program look like? First of all, there's a classroom training, bringing them in for a multi-day training and telling them about the organization. There's ongoing field training, and then there's self-directed training, a place online where they can go and improve their skills. So the classroom training, of course, with any classroom training, you're going to start with orientation. Your HR is going to get up and talk about all the policies and procedures, benefits, things like that. But also ask your HR department to do this. Talk to new employees about a career. Talk to them about a career ladder, a career path, places where they can go. So that you're not hiring employees just for a job, but you're hiring them to start a career. It's very important to tell them where they can go if they do a good job. And to give them examples. Tell them about people that were in their shoes just a few years ago who have gotten promotions. The people that you have at your classroom training, the speakers, make sure you're not picking them because they're close to where the training's happening or they're a really experienced staff person that's had a lot of success. Make sure that you're picking people that are teachers, and then make sure you teach to your manual. I know this sounds boring, teaching to the manual, but if you want them to use the manual out in the field, start by having them use it in the classroom. And then provide them with a glossary of terms. All organizations have their own shorthand, abbreviations and acronyms that they use. You've got to tell your new staff people what those things mean, because otherwise it's like you're talking in code. So before they ever get to the classroom, give them a glossary of terms of different things that are going on in your organization. When I was with the American Cancer Society, I had a speaker get up and say, RFL and MSABC are going to be on the EMT this year, so make sure that you're up to speed on the EMT. Well, she had lost them right from the beginning. RFL, of course, is Relay for Life. MSABC is Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. And the EMT was our event management tool. So she didn't tell them what that was, and she didn't tell them where to find it. So she lost them right away. Also, qualified tasks. What I mean by this is, new staff don't know what they don't know. You've got to tell them, you have to put different weights on different tasks that are required to put an event together. So an example of this is I had a staff person get up and talk about that she had a run that was really a great run, a 5K, and at the end of the race, they gave out candy from a candy company, and everyone loved it. The runners loved it. Well, I had several new staff that took from that. One of the important things of a race is to have that candy at the end. So one of the first things that they did when they got out in the field were to try to find a candy sponsor. So, it's important that when you train to a task pyramid. So make sure that you're telling them what the most important things are, what you have to do to have a good event. So you have to do these foundational things first. You have to have good committees. You have to have a good site. You have to have sponsorship, these things, before you move on to the next level when you start worrying about what you're going to do the day of the event. Because many times new staff go right to the day of the event. So having a task pyramid is really helpful. Okay, field training. Before I talk about field training, I want to make this point, that if your onboarding stops here, if you're just onboarding your staff in the classroom, you're not really training them. You're just telling them about their jobs. The real training happens out in the field. When I was in college, I took Italian for 3 years in the classroom. And I really didn't understand Italian until I went to Italy. And I had to speak it every day. And it's the same thing with your new staff people. They really are not going to understand their job until they're out there doing it, and you have to give them some guidance. So I think field training is important, and I think there's 3 different parts to that. Action plans, which are basically taking that task pyramid and putting it into practice, providing them with a mentor, and giving them accessible online training. So let's look at each one of these. Action plans are basically timelines that backdate tasks from the event date. So you should be doing these tasks 6 months away from the event. You should be doing these tasks 5 months away from the event. Basically what they do is they take a big event that's hard for a new staff person to get their arms around and breaks it down into its component parts, bite-sized pieces, so that they can figure out how to do the event. It also is a good management system. So I guarantee you, you have managers out in the field that manage this way. They call a new staff person into their office, or they call them up on the phone, and they say this, "How's it going?" So that new staff person doesn't know how it's going. You should be telling them how it's going. So basically, you're turning the conversation, the control of the conversation, over to the least experienced person in the room. A better way to have that conversation is this. Okay, let's look at your action plan. Last week you were supposed to be doing these tasks. Let's talk about some of the challenges you had with those tasks. Let's talk about what went well. And then at the end of the conversation, talk about what they're going to be doing the next week. It's a much better way to manage staff person and to tell them what they should be doing. Sets clear expectations and gives them direction. Action plans also do this. They create leading indicators. Who here is a manager of a manager? How many people here have been surprised by an event that didn't make as much income as you expected it to make? Okay, don't lie. Come on. It's happened to us all. One of the reasons that happens is we love to look at income reports. You know, when I was a VP of Income Development, it was like an attachment to me. I always had my income report. The problem with judging event success by an income report is by the time the income dips, there's very little you can do to intervene. Now, action plans, once you find out you're not getting the volunteers you need, you don't have the sponsorship, things like that, those are leading indicators. Those are things that you can get out there and correct, and you can have an intervention and get out there with your new staff person and correct it if you're judging an event success by those indicators. Mentorship, I think, is very important. If you don't already have this as a component of your onboarding process, think about doing it. There's a reason why most Fortune 500 companies have a mentorship program. It's because it works. It takes years of experience and puts it at the fingertips of new staff people. It also gives them a role model. Onboarding you, I think this is important. Have someplace online where new staff can go and get information. First and foremost, put your event manuals online. If you're handing your new employees a thumb drive or a hard copy of your manual, chances are that it's going to be out of date in 6 months. So your events should be dynamic. They should be changing all the time. You should be trying to put best practices into practice. And the best way to do that is to have your event manuals online so that you can change them on a regular basis. Also, no new staff person comes to your organization with all the skills that they need to do their job. So you have to have a mechanism to increase their skills while they're on the job. And a good way to do that is to create an onboarding university. So some of the topics that you want to cover with that is things like volunteer recruitment, online communication, business communication. This is a big one. What I found with a lot of our new employees when I was with the American Cancer Society was that they came and they had never written a business letter or a business email. You have to give them examples of how to do that, or they're going to struggle for hours trying to do that. If you give them that online, it's going to make their job that much easier. And also the other things like meeting planning and obtaining sponsorship. So at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to put a support system around your new staff person. So you have a supervisor that's going to talk to them about all their different tasks that they're doing. You're going to have ongoing training to increase skills. You're going to have a mentor to help them out. Someone that they can talk to that's not their supervisor, that's not going to be doing their review at some point. And of course you have HR that can talk to them about a career and also talk to them about any questions that they have with benefits. So I think this is also an important part of any plan that you have. Make sure that you're surveying your new employees. Those of you here that are executives, it's a great way of finding out if the things that you're trying to do at the top of the organization are making it down to the bottom of the organization. So I recommend at 3 months, at 6 months, and at a year, survey your new employees and find out how well they're doing and what problems they might be having. So let's, in conclusion, let's talk about the ROI. Now, if you're going to do this type of a development program, I know it takes a lot of resources and it takes a lot of time. But the ROI is well worth it because ultimately you're going to save coworkers time. One of the most frustrating things when I first started with the American Cancer Society is when we had an opening and I had to do my job and I had to do someone else's job that had left. I had to cover for that vacancy. So if you're able to keep people, you don't have to do that. And of course, your supervisors don't have to spend as much time interviewing. It also increases morale because turnover is a morale killer. It reduces time spent supervising. Even though your supervisor is probably going to spend more time in the first year, they're going to create a really good employee and they're going to spend less time supervising them. And then, of course, the big one, yields better events and makes more money. So we're going to go into a bit of an interactive session here. If you have questions, you can contact me here. But if you look, there should be a handout. Can someone pick up the handout? There should be a handout at your table. If you can pair up or go into groups of 3 and talk about some of your best practices with onboarding and some of the challenges that you're overcoming. And then there's a handout to help you with that. So we'll get back together in about 10 minutes.